Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Prof. and Yemi, it's good to see you again this weekend.
Healthy and well.
For another edition of This Day Live. Let's begin with the latest situation report of the spread of coronavirus in Nigeria. On Saturday, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirmed 239 new cases. Now, the total tally of infected persons in the country rose from 3,912 to 4,151, as reported on Saturday night via the Nigeria Center for Disease Control Twitter handle. The number of fatalities increased from 117 to 128, while recoveries increased from 679 to 745. The 239 new cases confirmed on Saturday were from 15 states. Lagos has the highest number with 97, Bauchi has 44, Kano 29, Katsina 19, Borno 17. The Federal Capital Territory recorded 7 new cases, while Kwara State has 6 new cases, Oyo 5, Kaduna and Sokoto reported 3 each, Adamawa, Kebbi, Plateau, and Ogun States recorded 2 each, while Ekiti has 1 case recorded in the state. In terms of prevalence, there have been 1,764 cases in Lagos, 576 in Kano, 343 in the Federal Capital Territory, 161 in Bauchi, 159 in Borno, 156 in Katsina, 115 in Ogun State, and 110 in Gombe. In Kaduna State, 98 cases have been recorded, 96 in Sokoto, 83 in Jigawa, 67 in Edo, 65 in Zamfara, 64 in Oyo. Others are as follows: Osun 38, Kwara 30, Nasarawa 25, Rivers 21, Kebbi 20, Adamawa, Akwa Ibom, Delta, and Plateau have all recorded 17 cases each. Ondo and Taraba 15 each, while Ekiti and Yobe have a record of 13 each. Enugu 10, Ebonyi 7, Niger 6, Bayelsa 5, Imo 3, and 2 each in Abia and Benue. Anambra has recorded 1 case that has since been discharged, while Cross River and Kogi remain the states where no official case has been reported. And here is the latest global picture of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Prof. Well, Prof. and Yemi, that's the picture, both locally and globally. And if you look at Nigeria, if you look at the league table, what I call the COVID-19 league table in Nigeria, you will see that the cases continue to go up. Some persons have said this is an indication of increased testing, even if some other persons have argued that per million, Nigeria is not testing enough, that we've done just about 109 persons per 1 million, which is still very low, and that we need to ramp up testing capacity. And it's unfortunate that many of the states do not have access to testing facilities. Gombe, for example, Bauchi, for example. These are states that have to send their samples to other states. And in the meantime, the Federal Capital Territory is saying that it's running out of test kits. In Lagos, over 3,000 samples are still waiting to be tested, according to the governor. Last Sunday, he made that disclosure. He has not said anything different since then. And then, of course, at the national level, the Center for Disease Control has also, through its Director General, had cause to complain that it was running out of testing reagents and kits. So it looks like there is one major challenge in that regard. But the other challenge, of course, is in terms of the differences, in terms of the response by the various states. Maybe for a few minutes, before we look at other dimensions, I would like us to maybe reflect on how these states have been responding. And then when you look at the COVID-19 league table, you see that there are fewer cases in the eastern part of the country. The northeast and the northwest, plus Lagos and Ogun, have more cases. But if you look at the numbers coming from the southeast, the numbers are low. Some persons have jokingly said, well, as in everything in Nigeria, the southeastern states have been marginalized. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe there's something that is being done in the southeast, perhaps. And then, of course, you look at two states that are not yet on that league table, with their governors refusing to cooperate with the federal government and refusing to admit that they could have cases of COVID-19. And in this regard, I refer to Cross River and Kogi states that are conspicuously missing. Let me start with you, Yemi.
I mean, I'll start with Kogi. And I think for me, what's interesting is that it's a reflection of sort of low trust. So Kogi is surrounded by 9 states, and all the states have a case of COVID-19. So people just can't imagine that Kogi wouldn't have. But I also like the fact that the state is insisting that you can't project ill on our states. If we don't have, we don't have. Stop making a big issue over do we have or do we not have. But I think two things strike me very interestingly. I believe it was on Friday, I was listening to the Commission of Information for Kogi, and he was asked a question about the app that they supposedly have. And the question was that, well, you're a pretty rural community. How is the app, how is your app being used? And he said, oh, we have very widespread data coverage. And most of our residents have access to data, which I thought was actually interesting. And then in the context of another question, he then said 75% of our residents are rural. So in the course of a 15-minute conversation, he managed to contradict himself by saying, one, that most of the people have access to data, and then secondly, by saying 75% of its population is rural. That's number one. And I think for me, that's the contradiction why people find it very difficult to believe that Kogi says it doesn't have a case if you're not unable to man it. There's a journalist who's done a piece about the case at the Federal Medical Center who's reported on the isolation centers in Kogi that they're not properly equipped. So those are the issues that for me, raise concerns and why people really don't believe Kogi, even though I like the fact that the state is sort of don't wish ill on us, but the facts seem to speak to the contrary.
Well, I think in Kogi, what we're probably dealing with is poor leadership and incompetence. And the most dramatic
you're saying leadership and incompetence today?
Yes, because during the week, the federal government had decided that it would send the Center for Disease Control team to 3 states, Kogi State, Rivers, and Cross River, to assist the authorities in those states and to also, help to check their facilities and also provide support in terms of, scaling up their testing capacity. But in Kogi State, those persons were practically driven out of the state because the governor said that they didn't need any help. The state already has enough experience from managing Lassa fever and malaria to be able to deal with infectious diseases. And in fact, he even threatened that if they stayed in the state, they will be taken to an isolation center for 14 days. And they will also be tested.
No, actually, instruction was given that the head of the delegation be taken to isolation center. But he did refuse. It is on the basis of the refusal, all right, to submit himself to go to the isolation center that they were compelled, in part, by force manu military. They were, compelled to go back. They were pushed, followed, monitored until they got to the airport way. So in this case, it is important to underscore that particular dimension. In fact,
I would say... Sorry, and I'm wondering, I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Is the governor technically wrong? Because his point was that, look, if the guidelines of NCDC say if you've been in a, what's it called? In a highly infested area, that you should be tested. And we're bringing people back in from overseas, automatic quarantine. And his point is that NCDC officials have been literally going around the state, around the country, in places that have high infestation. That so in them coming to their state, and I haven't heard the NCDC side, but what protocols are we putting in place to ensure that they are also not carrying? Let me land. And he made the point that there was an NCDC driver who had been infected in the process. So I thought it was an interesting, they're trying to play...
Well, just know that the NCDC, in the face of a national emergency like this, has, by its act, the responsibility to coordinate on a national scale, you know, and to cooperate with the states. And what we have seen in Rivers, Cross River, and Kogi is a rejection of the NCDC.
You made the point beautifully.
But, Prof, let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, then you can respond to the issues. It's time now for a short break here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yes, Prof, you are going to comment on the relationship between NCDC and 3 states, Kogi, Rivers, and Cross River.
Yes, I was trying to agree with the point you beautifully made by examining the functional responsibility of the NCDC, that it has, the exclusive responsibility to coordinate at the national level, and by so doing has the right to go to any constitutive state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. At that level, I agree with you. But I do not subscribe to your perception of the governor of Kogi State as being incompetent, describing the leadership as poor, and so on and so forth. You may have, and truly we may have, some good points to justify the way you look at it. But I think that what, in essence, is being manifested is the affirmation of the fact that we are operating a federal system. We are operating a federal system. There can be a policy at the federal level, all right? But when it comes to translating that particular policy into for implementation purposes, the modalities have always been ill-defined. And I think what is happening at the level of rivers and cross rivers, Kogi inclusive, is the fact that, look, these states are simply saying that, look, we still have, the constitutive authority to behave as a constituent of a federal system. Like Yemi rightly pointed out that, look, the governor is now saying we may have this corona saga, but do not try to impute, insinuate, or wish us, bad by saying we already have coronavirus. Now, but there is nothing to suggest that Kogi is not already playing host to corona patients.
What do you say about Rivers, the response in Rivers, where the governor today has gone ahead to demolish 2 hotels, one in Eleme, another one in One, on the grounds that those hotel owners violated the lockdown order. He himself is on the road arresting people, doing the work of the police, and accusing the Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations for Rivers State as sabotaging the efforts of the state. And he's also on record as having saying the federal government should not bring coronavirus to Rivers State. And vehicles that are found on the road are seized, and he has directed that those vehicles should be auctioned. And anybody that is found on the street, particularly in Port Harcourt and Obio Akpo local government, is taken straight to isolation center. How do you react to this?
Consistent with my position on this platform, I do not subscribe to and with any disrespect for regulation. I don't give any, respect to any individual who consciously act contrary to the rule of law. And that is the basis upon which Nigeria has always been, going through vicious circles, that we cannot make progress. We don't respect law in this country. We do not. Now, the law is meant to ensure orderliness. I cannot understand why government says, prevent the spread of coronavirus. Stay at home. Don't do this, don't do that. And then, for whatever reason, I'm not saying we cannot have genuine reason, especially if you have a situation of emergency, running to hospital. But you want to go and buy food. How many times do you want to go to the shopping mall? Why can't you go once and buy near, your shop?
No, but so Prof, there are persons who have complained about the high-handedness of the Rivers State governor, and that he may be abusing fundamental human rights out of his enthusiasm and exuberance to enforce the lockdown order. Is the demolition of people's buildings part of the law? Is it part of the law with regard to COVID-19? Does the governor, does he have powers to seize people's vehicles and auction them? These are the issues. Yemi, what do you think?
I think the challenge with Rivers, and I think with Cross River, is the fact that, and I think in quite a number of states as well, the governors have turned themselves into health professionals. This COVID-19 is a virus. It's medical. It's not politics. It's not grandstanding. It's not what I think or what I perceive or what my understanding tells me. It is a medical issue. And as we've seen in some states that have taken leadership, like Lagos, where Professor Abayomi is front and center, and we know him, we see him, we hear him. In Kaduna, Malame Rufai speaks about his deputy governor and the commissioners of health, both of them with public health backgrounds. But in most states, we see the governors, and particularly to your point, in Cross River and Rivers, we see the governors, we hear the governors, and the governors have made themselves the ones determining what is and what is not. And to your point, I don't think, if we compare, for example, to Kaduna has been clear that if you go ahead to have service, we will demolish your building. Now, it's emergency powers of the state governor. I don't know if it allows him to do that, maybe. But I think what I would have a problem with in Rivers, if that wasn't said ab initio. So he just wakes up and then decided that we're going to demolish this. Number one. Number two, to your point about enforcement. Now, if a state governor cannot work with the police, is seen to be commanding the members of the army, do this, put this point in isolation, do that, then I'm not quite sure where that leaves us.
But you have the reports according to which the policemen, are sabotaging interstate movement.
Yeah, so no, that's the governor's version, Prof.
And then, those are particular policemen. So I think what Dr. Abati is trying to say is sort of more institutionally. So you've decided that the police is not working, so you have become the police, and you have become the one...
No, not necessarily. Leadership by example. The governor comes in to say, okay, look, we are fine. It's just what you did last week. You provided leadership by example by saying, let us wear our face masks. Okay. And then we told the larger community, the larger public to say, okay, look, please, this is the regulation. Do not forget to put on your face mask.
Let's move away from...
But sorry, let me say this last one.
Let's move away from...
Sorry, Dr. Abati. On Cross River particularly, is Governor Yade continues to have large gatherings of people. While he espouses masks or his own understanding of science, he keeps putting people together. So to your point about disobeying or law and order, he himself is the chief disobey.
Yes, I agree with you at that level.
But let's talk about Lagos, where the governor has expressed great concern that the people in Lagos, they are not observing the social distancing guidelines. They still gather in front of banks. Vehicles, the yellow buses, as it's called them, they're supposed to reduce the number of passengers to just about 60%. But all of them have been carrying what Nigerians call full load, and he has threatened, he has read the Riot Act, that if this continues, Lagos State will have no option but to impose another lockdown. And you have to place that side by side what Professor Akin Abayomi, the Commissioner of Health, said, that with what he is observing, that the figures in Lagos could go up to hundreds of thousands if care is not taken.
120,000 by August.
120,000, he said, by July, August. Prof, what's your reaction to that? I know you will say again that people are lawless and they should be dealt with.
We will go beyond that one. Now, if we talk about 120,000, for instance, prescription, I think it's still a fair figure. Why? If you recall what the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa predicted, they predicted 3.3 million. All right? So 120,000 now.
3.3 million for Nigeria or the continent? For
the continent. Now, the share of Nigeria, they look at it in terms of percentages. Population. So, the figure clearly suggests that the future cannot be bright. Now, I will agree with the governor of Lagos State, Sanwo-Olu, if he quickly embarks on lockdown. The language every average Nigerian understands, all right? It's not this gentleman approach to life. You need to push them to the wall before they will begin to quickly learn lessons. That is what history has taught us. But by the time you just come with a law and you leave it like that, you expect that the ordinary Nigerian will respect. No, I think you must be a good joker at that particular level. And that's why, in many cases, you see why law enforcement agents misbehave, and they believe that, look, you need to put a dose of force in that particular case. But you see...
Sorry, Prof, to interrupt you. I wanted Yemi to intervene at this point. I mean, Prof is talking about, okay, lockdown, and Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State is also talking about extending the lockdown. But some people have a different opinion. They think that government still needs to tweak what it has done. Like, I got a press release from ANAP Foundation. And the ANAP Foundation has a think tank on COVID-19. And in their press release today, they are asking for the curfew to be relaxed, to allow people more time.
Curfew?
Yes, to be able, to observe social distancing more if they have more time.
More time like
And what they are proposing is, the curfew should be from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. the following day. And then they are also suggesting that the hours during which the banks are open, or the markets should be extended by 1 or 2 hours, so that people won't be under pressure to rush to the banks or to the markets. And then a special window should be created for the elderly. These are suggestions.
You see, this suggestion is at the level of the government. It's governmental in nature. Now, they should come up with suggestions at the level of the people who do not accept
that there's a problem.
That's a problem. So please, you cannot be making prescriptions, all right, for one side only. That is the issue. The major problem...
Well, on that note, let's take another quick commercial break here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Still with me in the studio, I have Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Now, before we went on break, Prof and Yemi were discussing Lagos State and the governor's response to the refusal of people to obey the protocols for social distancing. And I cited another view expressed by the ANAP Foundation think tank, asking for the relaxation of the curfew and more hours of the day for businesses to be allowed to open. But Yemi, you seem to have a different opinion.
I'm not quite sure I understand why relaxing the curfew from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m.
From 11 p.m.
Yeah, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Yes,
would help people with social distances when, as Prof
well,
said...
it gives them more time to
do what? That is at night.
To shop, to go around.
At night. What is open at that time of the day?
So at the same time to also spread.
Street markets. But I think more fundamentally is the point Prof made before before we went on break. The prescriptions are one-sided in their focus to government. How is it can we help citizens understand better what is at stake? What are we doing in terms of communication on radio?
Well, one of the recommendations is, more in terms of communication and sensitization.
But that's also
that's their first recommendation.
But that's also government. So I'm saying that what is it that the foundation is recommending for non-government stakeholders? Because we're all in this together. So it's not just, I have a slight challenge if the think tank is only focusing on government recommendations. We're all in this together. What other stakeholders have influence, have voice, have clout that can help us with sensitization so people actually understand? Because what I believe we're seeing is the level to which people don't understand the gravity of the situation. We were talking about this in the break. You have people selling face masks on the road. I've seen videos of people trying on face masks. So you try it on, if you don't like the fit, you put it down, you try another one. So that shows a fundamental lack of understanding. So those should be the focus areas. Mr. Peterside was MD of a bank. I was personally disappointed.
Chairman.
Or chairman. No, former MD when it started.
Chairman.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. I was personally disappointed when banks opened on Monday and seemed to have given no thought. I mean, I think maybe one or a couple of branches had spacing outside. Had given no thought to the process of people coming into the banks. Supermarkets had already started doing this thing weeks ago. They allow 5 people in. They had put measures in place for people to stay outside. So if you realize that people would tend to be rowdy, then you need to be prepared. People go to concerts. There are those markers you put, barriers you put. So you are prepared for people to come. Another thing I haven't heard in that week is any bank that's done some sort of study of why the people come to the bank. Why? Some Prof mentioned some people came to close their accounts. So if people came to close their accounts, why? Are they afraid their monies will be lost? Are they afraid that if they're on lockdown again, they don't have cash to spend? What's the feedback? What is the feedback that banks have gotten, and what are they saying that they're going to do around it? So for me, those are the kind of recommendations I'd like to see. Religious institutions. Who's engaging them? They have huge audience, huge clout, they have voice. Who's engaging them to let them explain to their members why this thing is so important? We've talked about this several times.
Bishop Oyedepo made a statement that I found a little bit very, very disturbing.
What did he say?
He said that anybody who is against, anyone coming to the church all along will die. I quote him.
And that why would government open markets for 6 hours and refuse to allow the churches to do 2-hour service?
So for me, for example, this is a point of engagement. Bishop Oyedepo is quite influential. He has churches all over the country. So if Bishop Oyedepo does not understand and is not able to articulate to his followers why this thing is important, why this is a problem, then we have a problem. I saw a video as well by another influential pastor, Pastor Chris Oyakhilome of Christ Embassy, saying that masks are not scientific. That because government has said we should wear it, you can wear it, but he doesn't think it serves any purpose. So, sorry, sir. So I'm just saying.
You are even more correct than that. At the level of government itself, the government is not united.
Exactly.
That's why you have whether in rivers, in cross rivers,
let's go up north. Let's go up north. Okay. Let's talk about Gombe, where a disaster is waiting to happen. Gombe has no testing center, it has no laboratories, it has no facilities.
Does it have an isolation center?
It claims to have an isolation center. But there was an incident at that isolation center in a place called Kwandon during the week when persons who had been placed on isolation there trooped out in protest. And they were joined by members of the immediate community and they started protesting that nobody had given them drugs, nobody had given them food, nobody was attending to them. The only explanation that the state government could give was that all the people in that isolation center were asymptomatic. So there was no need to give them anything. And,
including food.
Well, and the people said, look, we're even fasting and they are starving us
on top of
more and they are, putting us here. So they decided to troop onto the streets. It's not only in Gombe that they had that issue with food and drugs. Also in Bauchi, at the isolation center, the people in isolation center began to protest about food. Although Bauchi state government says that has been addressed.
But it was in Kano that they also kidnapped a doctor and a nurse.
No, in Kano, they even stole the phone of the doctors attending to them. Some of the patients were said to have been engaged in petty theft, you know. So these are some of the reports that we have from the north. But Gombe, what do you say about Gombe, Yemi?
No, but it's, again, we started off talking about leadership, and that's also a thing. How do you put people in a center with no food? Even if the drugs you are giving them is vitamin C. Just the psychology of that, of saying, I'm in an isolation center, I'm supposedly positive for something, I don't feel anyhow, I feel fine. So even if every day, rounds, vitamin C in the morning, vitamin E at night, or something that actually makes people feel cared for. But again, back to this whole point, we can't just say, all of us are in this thing together. And I think Prof made the point quite nicely that even if government officials are disparate in the way they address it, are not clear in how the importance they place on it, then you will see citizens come out to protest. Then, so as you said, some people were asymptomatic, and we know that you can initially be asymptomatic, then have symptoms. As you said, they were actually even tested positive, is why they're in the isolation center. So it means the members of the immediate community that came to do solidarity protests with them could easily have gotten infected. So we have, I mean, look, if we don't realize that this thing is this much of a problem, then we will continue to see the things that we see. Lack of leadership. And I say, as I said last week, and our president is missing. Because, I mean, I don't know, when did you see him last? Or hear from him? I'm just asking, because me, I have not seen him. So.
Yeah,
and his government
I see you're in love with President Buhari.
From Gombe to
you
Cross
River. You
River.
just must talk about him all the time.
He's the president of the Federal Republic. And it would be nice if he's awake.
No, he has repeatedly been drawing attention to the fact that he's not readily available. He's not present. So at least argument
is consistent. Because he remains consistent, in fairness to him.
Meanwhile, we'll continue to get reports of mass deaths from parts of the north. First, it was Kano. Later, it was Yobe. Now, there are reports of mass deaths also in Bauchi State, in a place called Azare. But the state government has denied it to say that, well, you know, it's seasonal. Usually during dry season, a lot of people die. But those who have investigated the matter claim that, in fact, many of these persons that have died, they have exhibited symptoms related to COVID-19. And this is a problem that we have in some states of the north. The leaders
Denial, yeah.
We had many weeks of denial from Governor Ganduje of Kano until he got to a point that he himself confessed that Kano State is in trouble.
It's in trouble.
So,
is Kano and Bauchi not border states? I believe
No, they are not border states. No.
Okay.
But we've had transportation of our marjories from one part of the north to the other. Yes, Prof.
It's most unfortunate. If you have leaders, as I've always said, that have eyes but refuse to see with the eyes, then the problem is not COVID-19 per se. It is the problem of inability to see with the eyes given by God.
Unwillingness to see. Not inability, unwillingness.
Well, you put it very nicely. You see, the issue is this. I observe that you have people being transported, put illegally in trucks, carrying cattle, carrying cows from the north to the east to Lagos. There are many reports like that. And they are from all these places, Zamfara, Gombe, all these northern parts. Now, the leaders of these countries, these states, the governors, are saying that there is nothing like coronavirus there. Yet, people are forcing themselves out, trying to escape. And then, when I read the reports that, look, there shouldn't be any interstate movement, and we now see these people always frolicking around the country, being transported by vehicles that have been licensed to move that is under the pretext of essential services being rendered. Now I ask myself, in light of the question you did ask, why do we have governors that cannot see well, that cannot hear well? Mm-hmm. Why do we have governors that will not know that we have a particular type of problem in their state? If you say it's not coronavirus related, okay, fine. What is the nature of the problem you have that is killing your people? Yep. You should tell us. Now, you have a situation whereby NCDC sent its delegation there. You refuse because you believe that your community is coronavirus free. Let us assume that it is coronavirus free. Why not test it? That's the beauty in the academic setting. You come up with your hypothesis. Nobody says you are wrong. Nobody says you are right. But we admit your hypothesis for testing. Now you come with the arguments. But when you refuse, in fact, the best answer, I think it was in Burundi. The Burundi. Now, it was said jokingly that in Burundi, how do you explain the fact that you don't have any case of coronavirus? Why is this zero? You now said yes, but we
have not done any testing.
Yeah, well, we have not done any test. We don't have any testing something. Exactly. So there's no way we can even know,
tell you anything.
Whether we do have or not. So you see.
But Prof, it's good you brought up the point about the Amajuris. Many of the Amajuris that have been repatriated from Kano or Yobe, they've been found to be positive. And then, in fact, other states have been rejecting human cargo from the north. Kwara turned back a truck because it had 200 Amajuris. And then governors...
They were first repatriated from Lagos.
Yes, governors in the southeast too have been expressing concern about human cargo and the violation of the lockdown on interstate movement. But let's take another short break here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenrowa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Now, before we went on break, we were doing a review of how various states have been managing the COVID-19 challenge. I would just like us to comment briefly on two more states. One, Oyo State, where Governor Seyi Makinde, despite the fact that the state has 64 cases, confirmed cases so far, and just 2 deaths reported from Oyo State, you find that the governor has been focusing more on herbal solution to COVID-19. When he tested positive for COVID-19, he said he used herbs, local herbs, to treat himself. And only a few days ago, he was said to have held a meeting with some departments at the University of Ibadan to see how they can collaborate to find a herbal solution. Also at the federal level, there's been talk about herbal remedy. The Department of Complementary and Alternative Medicine at the Federal Ministry of Health and the NAFDAC had a meeting with 35 phytomedicinal experts to see how Nigeria can also be like a Madagascar. And then, of course, most of the states we've been talking about, we've been complaining about the quality of leadership. Lagos State has been praised, but maybe there's also another example in Delta State where the response has been commended, perhaps because the governor in Delta is a medical doctor. I mean, Delta has up to 12 isolation centers, and the governor has been very proactive in apprehending violators and ensuring that testing is ramped up in that state. Quickly, before we take the next topic.
I'll quickly speak to alternative medicine and Oyo. I think it's good that this is forcing us to look inward. Obviously, it's something that we've disdained for many years. I forget the famous professor that was quite known for his work on herbal medicine, but it's something we could have built and actually invested in.
It's Professor Lambo?
Lambo, yes. Thank you very much. That we could have built on his work and encourage more people to go into that field of study, do the science behind it, make the patents a large scale. And as you said, I mean, Madagascar is trying to get the science behind it, but they were very unashamed in sort of pushing it forward that this is what we have and this is what we're using. And I'm excited about that, and I hope we can use this opportunity to step that game up.
Prof, quickly, before we take another subject related to COVID-19.
We have many scholars already in Nigeria who came up with the idea that, look, this problem can be clearly and promptly addressed through herbal medicine. I would suggest that there should be a national conference of all those who claim to have this herbal approach, as a solution to the problem. I think that would be a very good way forward.
Okay.
And on Delta,
it looks like today it's all been about COVID-19, but let's also look at a major development during the week. Earlier in the week, at least 256 Nigerians were evacuated from the United Arab Emirates, and they arrived Lagos on Wednesday night. Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, confirmed their arrival in a tweet, noting that they arrived at Murtala Mohammed International Airport via an Emirates airline flight. Meanwhile, the first batch of Nigerians evacuated from the United Kingdom arrived Lagos on Friday. Confirming the development, the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri, said first evacuation from the UK has landed in Lagos, where the passengers will be proceeding to Abuja, where they will be on 14-day compulsory isolation. And earlier today, the first batch of Nigerians stranded in the United States due to the coronavirus pandemic arrived in Nigeria. 160 Nigerians, including 8 infants, made the first batch of evacuees. They arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, around 11:05 a.m. today. They returned aboard an Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 787 aircraft under the special flight arrangements by the federal government for nationals stranded abroad. So Nigeria has made good its word to evacuate Nigerians stranded abroad and who are willing to return and who are willing to follow the guidelines, take a COVID-19 test, pay for their flight, and then when they are in isolation centers, they will also be responsible for their upkeep. But there have been complaints and there have been apologies, particularly with the handling of the persons that came from the UK on Friday and how they were stranded at the airport. And then the persons that came from the United Arab Emirates have also protested that they are being treated like prisoners. Yemi, over to you.
I think it's really quite unfortunate. I very much am in support of the federal government's policy of requiring testing and as well as requiring people to pay, as you've said, even though they've gotten a lot of pushback for that. However, again, just paying attention to detail and the minor things. Bring people in. The ones that arrive from the UAE, their complaints are that they're not even allowed to walk out into the building. And I don't see why that is a problem. Even as citizens, we're allowed to go out with masks. So if they're all wearing masks and they're within the compound, I really don't understand why they're not allowed to come out. And obviously, they complain about the quality of food that they're getting, even though they're, and as they say, they're paying for it. It's not that you're doing us a favor. We're actually paying for the services. And then the UK one, I honestly couldn't quite understand that. And again, very minor issue of even just communication. Because, I mean, the viral video that went around, the gentleman was complaining that we've been here for 3 hours and there's nobody here. How hard can it be to say, this is the challenge, we're sorry, make chairs available, there were babies, there was a gentleman that they said just had surgery. So it's just, again, a leadership issue, I would say, because no matter what processes were put in place, the ball dropped somewhere, and it really is quite unfortunate. But I hope they are now all settled and resting.
Well, Prof?
Grosso modo, leadership goes with means. The federal government of Nigeria does not have all the means.
And don't bring people back there. Leave them there.
No. They wish to come back home.
But you gave them guidelines to come back home. So ensure those guidelines.
The guidelines is for administration. No. the
I mean, they don't even have the means to ensure that there were officials on the ground to receive them.
Give them information.
For instance, when you are talking about not being allowed to move even within the something. Look, the other time the pilot, the crew that went with Air Peace to China, when they came back, they escaped. They left.
But this one, they're military personnel on the compound, so they're there.
No, what I'm trying to say, look, as much as I agree with the need to give them a befitting welcome, give them food, etc., all along, the issue is that they shattered, the aircraft. There are conditions attached to that. They have been told that when you arrive, you are going to be quarantined. You will be taken to isolation centers. They knew that one. So they should not expect any luxury per se.
No,
but not to the extent.
Comfort, not luxury. At least comfort.
Well, it's not. The comfort is that they were even brought from the UK back.
So you now bring me back and treat me like trash?
Hold on. Come on. Let's agree on this. You see, the issue is that...
Can you see the visuals?
Yes, I know. Why wouldn't you give them water? Why wouldn't you attend to them for 3 hours? I agree with that. But you see, the issue is that the situational reality of Nigeria is that at the airport, all those things, you will have one officer doing the job of 10 people. All right. So how many? And again, the people you expect to receive them, they too are afraid. Nobody wants to die. And now you say people are coming.
Don't amplify the stigma.
It is not
tested negative. So
it is not because you wear the mask that you are coronavirus free.
Well, Prof, I think the important point.
So everybody is taking
the important point is that the Minister of Foreign Affairs has apologized. Abike Dabiri, the chair of the Diaspora Commission, has also apologized. And those persons who came back from the UK, they've been taken to Abuja, and I believe that they are now in the isolation center.
They apologize simply because those passengers that were they paid.
Evacuated from the United Arab Emirates. We have good news that one of the passengers, one of the ladies, Mrs. Kafayat Amushon, had a baby in the course of that flight, and the flight had to go back. And eventually they came here. So that's good news, a bouncing baby boy in the course of the evacuation. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. See you next week.